Alright, let's dive into something that's been bubbling up in the news lately, the latest developments in the Middle East, specifically involving Yemen's Houthis, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me just say this: the situation is complicated. It's not just about one attack or one negotiation, it's about a web of geopolitical tensions that's been building for years. So, buckle up, because this is going to be a ride. Here's the hook: the Houthis just claimed another attack on a Saudi oil facility. Yeah, you heard that right. But what makes this really interesting is why they did it and what it means for the region. Personally, I think this isn't just about retaliation, it's a calculated move in a much larger game of chess. Let me explain. So, the Houthis targeted an Aramco refinery in Jazan using a drone. Now, Aramco isn't just any company, it's the crown jewel of Saudi Arabia's economy. Attacking it sends a message. But here's the thing: the Houthis framed this as a response to Saudi drones breaching Yemen's airspace. From my perspective, this is classic tit for tat, but it's also a way for the Houthis to assert their relevance in the region. What many people don't realize is that these attacks aren't just random acts of aggression, they're strategic. The Houthis are backed by Iran, and every move they make is part of Iran's broader strategy to challenge Saudi influence. Now, let's zoom out for a second. This attack comes at a time when Iran is making new demands about negotiations with the US and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. If you take a step back and think about it, this is all connected. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, said negotiations can't resume until the US corrects its behavior. What this really suggests is that Iran is playing hardball. They're not just asking for sanctions relief, they want a complete overhaul of US policy in the region. And honestly, that's a tall order. The US isn't just going to roll over, which means we're looking at a stalemate at best. One thing that immediately stands out is Iran's demand for the US to lift the naval blockade of Iranian ports and withdraw its military from the area. This raises a deeper question: is Iran trying to regain control of the Strait of Hormuz as a bargaining chip? The strait is a lifeline for global oil supplies, and if Iran can dictate terms there, it gives them immense leverage. But here's the catch: the US isn't backing down. The Pentagon is actually pushing to accelerate weapons production, which tells me they're preparing for a long-term standoff. In my opinion, this is a dangerous game of chicken, and neither side seems willing to blink. Now, let's talk about the Houthis' attack on the Mocha port. This port is crucial for Yemen's internationally recognized government, and targeting it is a direct hit to their ability to operate. What this implies is that the Houthis are trying to weaken their opponents internally while also sending a message to Saudi Arabia and the US. A detail I find fascinating is how the Houthis are able to coordinate these attacks despite being in the middle of a civil war. It shows they're not just a ragtag group, they're a well-organized force with significant backing. Here's where it gets even more interesting: the escalation threatens to reignite Yemen's civil war, which had been on pause since 2022. Personally, I think this is the most alarming part of the story. Yemen is already one of the poorest countries in the world, and another round of fighting would be catastrophic. But from a geopolitical standpoint, it's also an opportunity for Iran to further destabilize Saudi Arabia's backyard. It's a win-win for them, even if it's a lose-lose for everyone else. Now, let's talk about the potential Iran-Oman deal on the Strait of Hormuz. On the surface, it sounds like a step toward de-escalation. Ships can pass through without fees, and it restarts negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. But here's the kicker: the deal is only temporary, and it's contingent on the US meeting Iran's demands. In my opinion, this is Iran's way of buying time and testing the waters. They're not giving up anything significant, but they're positioning themselves as the reasonable party. It's a smart move, but it's also a risky one because it could backfire if the US calls their bluff. So, where does this leave us? Honestly, I think we're at a tipping point. The Houthis' attacks, Iran's demands, and the US's military buildup all point to a region on the brink. What makes this really interesting is how interconnected everything is. It's not just about Yemen or Iran or Saudi Arabia, it's about the balance of power in the entire Middle East. And if things go south, the consequences could be global. Here's my closing thought: We often talk about these conflicts in terms of politics and strategy, but let's not forget the human cost. Yemen's civil war has already caused unimaginable suffering, and another escalation would only make things worse. So, as we analyze these developments, let's also ask ourselves, is there a way to break this cycle of violence? Or are we doomed to repeat it? Let me know what you think in the comments below.